All right, so I wanted to talk about a video and just a portion of a video where Graham Oppy is talking. So Graham Oppy is an atheistic philosopher. He's absolutely brilliant, just ridiculously smart. I can't hang with him sometimes. You know, as I'm watching some of his videos or reading some of his books, I can't hang. He wrote a little book called Basics of Atheism, and he really helped me think through atheism on a deeper level. A very good writer, very detailed. And the thing about Graham Oppy is he's very refreshing. He seems to be kind. He seems to be just a very polite person. So he's not like a Richard Dawkins. I have a hard time just watching or reading anything by Richard Dawkins because he's so biased. He's a very poor philosopher. In fact, I think that's what Einstein said. He said the problem with many of us scientists is we're very poor philosophers. Well, Richard Dawkins is a poor philosopher. So when it comes to Graham Oppy, I think he's a brilliant individual. And I want to comment on something he says here. I don't disagree with what he's saying. I just want to comment on it and bring some thoughts concerning the book of First John. So listen to what he says here.
Yes, so in terms of justifying Christian belief, right, or making it rationally permissible, so you're open to saying that the arguments could do some of that, that an experience could do some of that as well, presumably. Like neither sounds like it's strictly necessary, but they could separately justify Christian belief along the lines that you suggest.
Yeah, so I think that you could be a Christian and think that the foundation of your belief really lies in these amazing experiences that you had, or you could be a Christian and think, actually, you know, when I weighed up all of the considerations, my judgment was that this was where the truth lies, and either of those could work.
Okay, so I want to comment on that. If someone were to ask you, have you ever seen God? I don't know if you've heard this before, but if someone were to ask you, have you ever seen God? Well, I think that the appropriate answer, if you're a genuine Christian, I think the appropriate answer, you know, what's the date today? August 22nd, 2022. The appropriate answer is to say, no, I was born too late. But had you been born in Palestine in the first century, you could have seen God. You could have listened to God preach. You could have witnessed potentially a miracle take place. You could have even sat down and have a chat with God, with Jesus Christ, right? So that's the argument of the book of First John. John is trying to explain to his readers, hey, we were there. We were there. We talked with Jesus Christ. We heard the gospel message, the good news of Jesus Christ, that he died on the cross to save people for their sins, and he resurrected to give new hope. We heard that message straight from his lips. We were there. This is not some made-up person. We're not basing our beliefs off of just some spiritual experience that we've had. We're basing our belief on the fact that Jesus Christ is a real person. He was there. He's the Son of God. And he's explaining how people can be saved. He's explaining the spiritual realities. So I say all this because the great argument of First John is that our faith is tied to history. It's not abstracted from history. It's tied to history. So for people to come along and say, okay, I've had this spiritual experience that has led me to have faith in Christ. I understand that. But if I were to find out today that Jesus Christ, without a shadow of a doubt, was not who he said he was, that he didn't die on a cross and resurrect, if I found out those things, I would take my Bible and I would set it down and I'd never come back to it again. I'd stop recording all these videos because what I believe is not true. The book of First John is arguing that the test of truth is not simply based off of experience. It's revelation. So Jesus Christ is a real person. He died on the cross. He resurrected. He's the Son of God. And we believe this as genuine Christians. At least I do. as a genuine Christian, I believe that the history is good. There's historical evidence for these things that happened 2,000 years ago. And God has preserved his word over time. He has preserved a reliable record. So Graham Oppy talks about how, there's some people that have that experience, but then there's other people that they look at all the historical evidence and they say, okay, this is what makes sense to me. I think this is right. I'm on that other end, I would say, where if all of a sudden I felt like there was no historical backing for Christianity, I don't think that I would have become a Christian. Now, of course, I believe that God regenerates and he spiritually generates new life in us. So it's not simply about being convinced. There is an experience. You have to make a connection with the living God. But it doesn't begin and end with experience. It begins and ends with God disclosing himself to real witnesses. I believe in the Christian faith because, as John says, he was there. I'm looking at all the documentation. I'm looking at all of this, and I'm recognizing that this historical evidence seems very convincing. And I think through that seeking, God has penetrated my heart, so to speak, and helped me understand who he is. So there's an experience element to it. I'm sure of that. But at the end of the day, what we believe as Christians, according to the writing of 1 John, is that this is tied to history. Jesus is a real person, not some made-up deal. So I just wanted to comment on that. I'm not a philosopher. I study it on some level. But I wanted to just kind of point out that I think Graham Oppy has kind of those two things right, where there are people that base things off of experience and people that base things off of, hey, I've studied, I've thought through all this, and this is what makes most sense to me. And so I wanted to just share that the whole argument of 1 John is that experience may be a part of the Christian faith, but what we should be understanding is that all of this is real. This is real history. Jesus Christ is a real person. He's a son of God. He died and he resurrected. And if none of that happened, there's no point in believing. So anyway, thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you in the way.